Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting. Members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting, including filming, photography, making an audio recording, providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Can I welcome Mark Bayliss, Deputy Police Crime Commissioner for West Mercia, Chief Superintendent Ed Williams, West Mercia Police, and Gareth Bolton, Chief Executive Officer, OPCC West Mercia. We'll be hearing from you shortly. Thank you. Julian, can we have an appointment of substitutes?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have got some substitutes with us tonight. So Karen Loong is here for Alex Kinnersley, Hannah Cooper is here for Katie Collier, and Jessie Jaggett is here for Karen Holmes. I should just add that Councillor Alan Amos has sent his apologies.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, can we have declarations of interest? Sure, Councillor Lawrenson.
Type in notes there. Yeah, Sanctuary Housing is my employer for my day job. Thought I'd better mention it given the housing items later on.
Not a problem. Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought it was worthwhile. I'm a member of Perdis Vargium, so anything about freedom leisure. Thank you.
Sure. Any other declarations of interest? No? Fine. Agenda item 3, do we have any public participation? No, fine. And can we move on to the minutes of the last meeting then, please? Go them page by page. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Councillor Lewin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, at the last meetings we had, there's a mention about we'll get an update on the council tax unpaid empty homes premiums, and I was just wondering whether we knew when the council would be getting that, if that's okay.
Sure. Tom?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. The options around increasing premiums on long-term empty properties is being considered. It will form part of the MTFP process. So any decisions around setting council tax rates need to be made before the following financial year. So it can take effect from April and they'll be presented to members as part of the MTFP process.
Okay, thank you.
But okay, any other queries on the minutes? No? Are we okay to take them as a true and accurate record then? All in favour? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 5, we have the presentation from the Deputy West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner, Mark Bayliss. Can I just remind members, obviously the official scrutiny of the Police Crime Commissioner does sit at County Hall through the Police Crime Panel, and it's by invite. Every year we invite the PCC to address this committee, and we're grateful that the PCC accepted that offer every time we've asked. So if you can frame it in the context of what it means to us locally, that would be great. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and it's a delight to be back in Worcester for a night. Thank you very much for the invitation. John sends his apologies for not being able to meet you tonight. You happen to pick the 1 week where he's on annual leave, and so you've ended up with me, I'm afraid. If I can start by introducing my colleagues and why they're with me tonight. So on my right is Chief Superintendent Ed Williams. Ed is the new commander for the local policing unit covering Herefordshire and Worcestershire. I don't know if you want to say any more. Or
Delighted to be here. Nice to see some former faces from previous roles. So, as Mark says, recently taken up the role of Chief Superintendent. You'll know Gareth Morgan, Superintendent for South Worcestershire, who, under the new model, will be my Superintendent for Safer Neighbourhood Teams, Local Policing and Prevention.
Thanks, Ed. And to my left is Gareth Bolton, who is the Chief Executive in the Office for the Police and Crime Commissioner. Do you want to say any more, Gareth, on what your role? Or?
No, I'll be all right.
Okay. Gareth's here to make sure that I don't fall into too many bear traps tonight. Thank you. Ed and I are going to go through the presentation, if that's all right with you, Chairman. We'll do it as a bit of a double act. Probably best to let us run through it and see what we cover. We've tried to cover off the issues that that the committee asked us to. If we haven't covered everything, feel free to pull me up on it, and we'll happily do those. But I'm sure it will spark questions. I'm happy to take what you would like at the end. So if we could move on to the... Oh, just lost the slides. There we go. If we could move on to the next slide, please. This is just a reminder of John has a statutory duty to produce a police and crime plan, which sets out the broad strategy for his role, both in relation to policing, but also in relation to his other statutory functions in terms of victims and other roles. And he has to produce that every time there's a post-election. And John consulted on this last year. These are the 4 themes of the current Safer Communities Plan: cutting crime, pretty obvious what we're trying to achieve there, policing with the community, a new focus and increased focus on visibility and engagement with our communities, supporting victims and witnesses as a third area of activity, which is clearly a continuing theme from his previous plan, and then finally one that will come as no surprise to anybody delivering public services, which is about maximising resources and delivering value for money. So we published that in November last year after a considerable degree of consultation with partners and with the general public to gain a view. I appreciate people know most about West Mercia, but just to give it that context, West Mercia obviously covers those 4 upper tier authorities of Worcestershire, Herefordshire, Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin. It has a population of about 1.2 million people. It's about 3,000 square miles. From the bottom to the top, it is a considerable distance in terms of that. And in terms of police numbers, we'll come to it, but we're about 2,500 police officers. So that was the context in terms of John's statutory duty and the plan. The Chief Constable is operationally independent of the Commissioner, clearly, and is responsible for delivering for operationalising that strategy and having due regard for it. If we could move on to the next slide, please. We wanted to talk a bit about satisfaction and trust in the police. This data relates to the most recent quarter of data we've got, quarter 4, 24-25. First panel looks at victim satisfaction, which has generally improved over the recent times. You get some by crime type here. Over 6 months, we ask and survey people about satisfaction of victims. Burglary, 88%. Hate crime victims, 86%. Domestic abuse, 83%. And violent crime, 74%. We have other data, but in terms of key theme types, I thought you'd be most interested in that. The second panel deals with confidence in the police, and we do ask in our quarterly survey, which is benchmarkable with the national survey, the Crime Survey of England and Wales, about confidence. 79% of the public said that they had confidence in West Mercia Police. That has stayed broadly similar for the last few quarters. It was higher in the past. It did take a serious knock in, like all police forces, particularly over the terrible incidents that happened in London. The Sarah Everard case and others had a big knock on confidence in policing more generally. The second question asks about how often, how frequently you've seen a PCSO or an officer, and 18% of the public have seen a PCSO or an officer every week. And then 3/4 roughly of the population say that crime and antisocial behaviour is not a problem in their area. So again, we monitor these as key trends in terms of, and we try to use some geolocating to see whether there are particular hotspots in terms of satisfaction as well. The final panel deals with contact with West Mercia. As you can see, 999 calls, our target is 90% of calls answered within 10 seconds. In the last quarter, we've beaten that. We're at 92%. We're constantly trying to improve that. We're happy. The Commissioner and I are happy with the 9 service. 101 is still something we on behalf of the public, we get concerns about the length of time people wait for a 101 service, and we are continuing to work with the force to see how that can be improved. You can see there that the mean wait time was about 2 minutes and 23 seconds for an answer of a call on a 101, then that's the non-emergency line. But we know that there is a big variation at time with that. We have done the force has implemented a number of things like Ringback and other initiatives to try and tackle that. We might want to come back to that. The third one, which is dealing with how quickly we respond to the emergencies, the grade 1 calls. 3/4 of those are dealt with within 20 minutes, which again is our performance target. Now, when you think of a county like Shropshire, for instance, which is huge and geographic, sparsely populated, or Herefordshire, another large, sparsely populated population, actually getting from wherever the patrol vehicle is to the location can be a real, even using pursuit tactics and advanced driving, it's a long distance sometimes that needs to be traversed. And then the final one there is about the percentage of crimes that are that have action taken, and as you can see, it's about just over 13%, which is slightly above the national average, but only just. It's roughly about the same. So that's, if I may move on to the next slide, which is about key crime types, and this relates to South Worcestershire. And you can see we pulled out here just what's happened over the last couple of years. The good news is that total recorded crime has fallen by 5% in the most recent year. The year before it fell by 6% overall in West Mercia. So we've had a 2-year declining pattern in terms of total crime. You can see in the last year in South Worcestershire, we've had quite significant reductions in drug offences and in burglary. Drugs does include both possession and trafficking offences. It's good to see, and burglary includes home and unconnected buildings. So those were both, particularly burglary is such an impactful crime on people in our society that it is good to see. On the other side, we have seen increases in some of the other crime types. We've seen an increase in rape in South Worcestershire, 18%. I'll come back to that because that it's a relatively small number, so a small number of extra offences has a disproportionate effect on it, but it is a worrying trend, and I'm sure Ed will want to speak on that, as well as other sexual offences as well, which have also risen. Domestic abuse, which is not a crime in itself, but is a marker on all crime types, stayed at the same. There was no increase, no decrease. We look at domestic abuse slightly differently in terms of our performance statistics because, of course, reduction in it doesn't necessarily mean that there's less happening. It might mean that there's less being reported, and an increase in it might mean that we're being more successful in encouraging people to come forward and speak about it. So some interpretation around the data is really important now. If we could move on to the next slide, which is about ASB. Appreciate this will be probably one of the areas you are particularly interested in. The good news, starting with the good news, there's been a 7% reduction in ASB incidents reported to the police in South Worcestershire in the 12 months ending May 2025 when compared with the previous year. We've mapped this out all incidents in South Worcestershire. Well, this is for South Worcestershire, but the same pattern applies across the force. You can see by hours of the day when the peak in terms of ASB happens, and peak ASB hours are between 6 and 7 in the evening. And in terms of by days, nearly half of them are recorded on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays. And I don't suppose any of you will find that surprising, given what I'm sure you get in your postbags and emails about that. So we'll return to that, I'm sure, but that is the data. Ed, you were going to cover the next ones, I think?
Yeah, so I could have the next slide, please. So this slide talks about sexual violence and some of the roles that we've introduced over the recent past. So I think we'd all agree, if you experience becoming a victim of any sexual offence, it's the most harrowing and intrusive of crimes, and certainly the most impactful on those victims. We've introduced dedicated officers, VORG officers, so violence against women and girls, RASO sergeants, so any police force likes a good mnemonic or an abbreviation. So what that stands for is rape and serious sexual offences. So they are detective sergeants who share best practice, work with our operational teams, so both uniform and in CID, to share that level of expertise, learn some of the lessons that come out from local safeguarding reviews, some national best practice, to ensure that we constantly strive to deliver the very best service we can to victims of sexual abuse. And also how we want our staff, in terms of those staff working in our problem-solving hubs, prevention hubs. It's not just about charging offenders, it's about putting suitable long-term interventions in place, so using sexual harm prevention orders and other civil orders that provide an opportunity to control, to influence, and if perpetrating does continue, a degree of confidence that we can take positive action against perpetrators. The Online Safety Act, I'm sure you will have heard of. It's been largely talked about in the media over a number of months. It came into an effect back in January 2024 and introduced specific offences such as cyber flashing, so perpetrators from all over the world, or any victims from all over the world become victims from within their own bedrooms, and how the legislation allows us to catch up with how some of those technical advances are developing, but also specific offences that include sending false information intended to cause non-trivial harm, threatening communications, and intimate image abuse. If we can have the next slide, please. That's back to you, Mark.
I think it is, yeah. This is regarding police numbers and precepts. So this, the chart, which I apologise for, you can't really read even on a massive screen like this. This shows that the number of police officers in West Mercia has risen by about 29% since 2016. John became PCC in 2016, hence the date selection. Over that period, our officers have risen from, I'm struggling to read it myself, but I think it's 1906 or 1960, up to 2,518. We have seen a massive increase in the number of officers. That did, before people question, there was a reduction in officers in the period before that, but the number of officers has surpassed any previous total. We have never had this many officers in West Mercia before. In its history, the force was formed in 1968, and this is the highest number we've ever had. In terms of precept, West Mercia has the second lowest council tax since 2016. John, in his early years, was able to retain and keep the council tax precept rises down. It hasn't been possible in the last 2 or 3 years, where successive governments have required the PCCs to foot the majority of the bill for local policing. So last year, the maximum you could go without a cap was £14, and John put it up by £14. The disappointing news, and I'm sure we will you'll forgive me for saying this, but is in the comprehensive spending review, there is almost no extra money in the Home Office budgets. The assumption in the CSR was that police forces budgets will grow by 1.7%, but all of that growth is predicated on council taxpayers paying more year after year after year in the next 3 years. We don't expect any real terms growth in the amount of money we're getting from government at all. And in fact, the last year with the NI rise, because a national formula was applied to forces, with the uplift we got from the government in terms of paying for the NI rise did not cover the NI rise. So we were faced with an additional pressure from that. So that's a challenge going forward in terms of precept. Back to you, I think, Ed, for police conduct.
Yeah, thank you. So we understand and recognise when officers engage in inappropriate or criminal activity, it has a huge impact on wider public confidence. It lets our communities down. It lets our officers and staff down who strive to do a brilliant job every day, bringing offenders to justice and supporting victims. So throughout 24-25, 13 officers and staff were dismissed from the force for a number of different offences. That doesn't mean they all committed criminal offences, but they were found guilty of gross misconduct, of which is assessed by an independent chair that chairs a hearing. You can imagine the process that takes place. That's not an insignificant task. That's a department that falls responsibility to our professional standards department, something that we've invested in recently. We absolutely want to ensure that our staff deliver to the highest standards in line with the Code of Ethics, which you'll have heard and spoken about previously. There's a number of themes that already says on the slide. So some of the offences, some of the misconduct matters that our staff were found guilty of included data protection, so using information available on police systems inappropriately or not for a policing purpose. Our staff are informed, educated and delivered various inputs right from the first week of joining the force about how absolutely necessary it is to only use information available to them for a policing purpose, and the consequences of not doing that. To ensure that we've got a level degree of confidence, obviously every keystroke on a police laptop and a police system is auditable, and then we maintain some dip checks and dip samples in terms of supervisors checking in to ensure that that is appropriate and consistent, and we have internal routes to report anonymously concerning sets of behaviour or misconduct to professional standards who account. So the superintendent in professional standards, for example, reports directly to our deputy chief constable to ensure that impartiality in the force. And it says there that the PCC has quarterly professional standards and assurance and accountability meetings to ensure that the force is acting appropriately, progressing investigations. So one of the things that we constantly strive to improve is the amount of time an internal investigation takes. We'll have seen some of the horrendous and abhorrent cases that we've seen nationally, but also here in West Mercia, where we've failed members of the public and victims, and therefore it's absolutely essential that we work as quickly and as swiftly as we can, recognising the right to a fair trial and all of those individual rights to remove criminals or people responsible for gross misconduct offences from the organisation as quickly as we possibly can. The process does take a time, but there are various different processes that we have to follow. Mark, back to you.
Yep, if I could move on to domestic abuse services. And I know from my time on the council this is an area of particular interest to many members. And so just in terms of victims provision, we provide and John's commissioning services support services for both victims and for perpetrators to try and change behaviour. So in the victim space, West Mercia Women's Aid deliver our independent domestic violence advisor service for those who've had high risk of harm. West Mercia Women's Aid are based here in the city. They deliver a fantastic service. It's a service that's available across West Mercia, all of these services, and where we've particularly tried is to make sure that we have an equitable service across the whole of West Mercia in this area. We spend, I haven't got the figure to hand, but the IDVA service is well over £1 million in terms of the service delivery. Victim support also work with domestic abuse victims, providing standard to medium risk victims with support, and West Mercia Women's Aid also deliver a children's and young people's programme. We know that breaking the cycle of domestic violence and abuse is so important, and those children and young people who are affected and see it in the home, their emotional and support needs need to be delivered as well. So we're very proud of the services that are available for them there. We, on the perpetrator side, our high-risk perpetrators, so those who are committing domestic abuse. Our high-risk programme is called DRIVE, and is an accredited high-risk perpetrator programme with the aims of reducing the number of both adult and child victims of domestic abuse, also delivered in the city by Cranston and elsewhere across West Mercia, but is a Worcester-based service here as well. We also have the Men and Masculinity programme, delivered in partnership with West Mercia Women's Aid, who deliver victim support provision that supports linked and ex-partners to those men accessing the service. And the service consists of 48 hours of psycho-educational group sessions for perpetrators of domestic violence and abuse, delivered in 2 hourly group sessions on a weekly basis for 24 weeks. That too is available within the city as well. We also have a further service called CEDAR, which is an out-of-court resolution for what is regarded as standard risk perpetrators. So there's a range of provision. In total, our domestic abuse services are going to be in the order of about £3 million in terms of our commission services. So it's a significant amount of money. We also, I know the Dawn project locally is one that was much loved by members in Worcester, and obviously we provide the money to the CSP, the South Worcestershire CSP, who decided to spend 30,000 of that money as continuing the support for the Dawn project, but that money comes from the Commissioner. It's not always apparent where that money appears from. It's not from central government, it's from the Community Safety Partnership, who have allocated it to support that funding. We move on to accessibility and visibility. I think you're going to do this one.
Yeah, thank you. So something that we know is really important to communities across West Mercia, not only being available and visible in the traditional sense, but also being available and visible online too. So we've introduced over the last few years an engagement tracker, so to track what our safer neighbourhood teams do in terms of how we use our engagement vans, the number of surgeries, the number of local meetings, all of the stuff that previously has been really hard to measure in terms of coming to forums like this and saying, our officers are really busy, but what have they done? Tell me how many times they've been to X location and how many times we've been here. The engagement tracker has allowed us to do that. It's an opportunity to showcase some of the good work that our staff do. And when we are sometimes challenged about, well, you've never deployed in such an area, we can actually report back with some data as opposed to anecdotal stories. We've got a successful sign-up rate, so something called Neighbourhood Matters. Hopefully some of you are signed up yourselves. So in terms of one of the benefits of that system allows for two-way engagement, so stories, information, witness appeals from that system are shared with the public, and also an opportunity for the public to contact named individuals in their safer neighbourhood teams to report concerns or respond to those witness appeals. South Worcester, or sorry, here in Worcester, has got a town centre team, something that we introduced for 10 additional town centre teams across West Mercia. Worcester's got the largest in terms of it's made up of 6 dedicated officers that are on duty, primarily on day shifts, but some late shifts as well, tackling antisocial behaviour, shoplifting and crime and antisocial behaviour that we typically see associated in town centres. Part of their job is to build relationships with retailers, stakeholders, and to provide a proportionate and an effective response to those retail-type crimes. Visibility is often talked about in the police. The Deputy PCC has talked about the number of officers we've got. If we were to strive for 100% compliance in terms of everybody as every single police officer, I think personally we'd be talking about a ridiculous increase in numbers that wouldn't be proportionate. It's about how we maximise and market ourselves to maximise visibility to the public, and how we do that through yourselves as key stakeholders, how we work in partnership with other partners to celebrate some of the success, to share some good news stories, which I'll talk about at the end of the presentation, but also how we can reassure the public that they need to feel safe, and how we can do that through local engagement through our local policing teams. If we go to the next slide. As part of our local policing community charter, we reach out to parish councils, town councils for their local priorities. Policing is about working in partnership with the community, an opportunity to feed back, as you said we did, to build that wider public confidence. There are over 400, don't quote me, parish councils across West Mercia, an incredibly high amount. We've got 82 safer neighbourhood policing teams that police and work in partnership with those. And some of the priorities are often speeding and traffic offences, which we will talk to shortly, antisocial behaviour and theft, including rural crime. And that's why we have invested in rural crime officers, working with police staff, rural crime officers, but also working with partners such as the National Farmers Union and local stakeholders to ensure that rural crime is seen as a priority. We provide an appropriate response. And whilst we invest in ensuring that we provide a sufficient response, but also that focus on prevention. So I want our staff to be excellent at preventing crime, avoiding that victim of crime experience as much as we possibly can. So that's why we want our SNTs to be relentless in their problem-solving ability, relentless in working on their local areas, local patches, building relationships and confidence so victims of crime can have the confidence to report crime, to come forward, but also then to design crime out, whether that's working with community safety partnerships or with other stakeholders to ensure that those crimes aren't repeated time and time again. And we then break that cycle of offending, whether it's an individual, a crime series, or organised crime that we tackle on various different levels. Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to quickly, we'll cover the last couple of slides. Appreciate you want to get on to questions. Speeding is a common issue, clearly. The majority issue we hear from local elected members. S&T colleagues are working closely with the road safety team to meet community priorities, and as Ed said, we collect those from parish priorities and other areas in order to feed into this. During the last quarter of the year, there were 17 deployments of Community Speedwatch. I don't know if there is a Speedwatch in the city. There are certainly in the surrounding parts of South Worcestershire, there are community Speedwatches which work well. In terms of the fixed location vans, the second or middle picture there were 1,400 deployments over the last, I think that was the last year actually, and 15,000 offences were picked up. I'm sure nobody in this room, but an awful lot of offences were identified and people prosecuted. And finally, our traffic management advisors are working closely with the local authorities, and primarily in this case the county council, around the 3 E's around road safety, which are about education, enforcement and engineering, and each partners all have different parts to play in delivering activities that make our roads safer. And then the final slide is about just some good news, and you were going to cover this, Ed?
Yeah, an opportunity to share some of the good news, again, to build trust and confidence in our communities. Negativity will often fill a void if we don't share some of those good news stories, some good results that we've shared both online, through yourselves, so that can be shared on Facebook groups, Facebook pages. Often the reach of those is into the tens of thousands, if not larger. And one example, I won't go through them all, but how we use social media. So recently the city centre team here in Worcester responded to some community intelligence reports, to some drug dealing at an address. They deployed, identified a young male on his way back to the property, took positive action in terms of an arrest. Officers gained entry to the said property, and inside there were over £70,000 worth of drugs seized. So a significant amount. If you think £70,000 worth of drugs that have been taken off the streets, as it were, the harm that could have caused, the addiction, the suffering, and the unintended consequences is significant. So one example, I appreciate we're tight for time, so I won't go through any others, but very happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ed and Gareth. I'll open it up to questions now. First speaker I've got is Hannah Cooper, Councillor Land.
Thank you very much,
Councillor
Chair.
Cooper.
If I may, I'd like to ask 2 questions, please. I'd like to know 2 separate questions. So I'd like to know the salaries of the PCC, the Deputy PCC, the Assistant, and the time commitments, say hours per week in those roles, please. That's my first question. Thank you. I was going to let you answer that first, but in this year, so in 174 days, there have been 194 road traffic collisions in Worcester City. I wondered what West Mercia are doing to deal with poor driving standards, not just speeding. So today, for instance, I did a 7-minute walk and saw 5 people on their mobile phones whilst driving. Thank you.
Well, the salary of myself and John is public information. It's on the website, so feel free to have a look. But I'll tell you exactly to the penny what my salary is. It's 52,700. Hasn't changed in 3 years. It's set by the Home Office, and the PCC salary I think is 72 or 75.
It's slightly higher than that. I think it's 78,500 or something. Like
Again, set by the Home Office, not a locally determined value. It is what is set for all PCCs across the country. The APCCs work on a contract basis, and it's whatever hours they do. My role and John's roles are full-time, more than full-time in the majority of cases. I used to work part-time when I was a county councillor. I am now a full-time employee of the OPCC. Our total, I'm going to guess at it, but our total cost of the PCC's office in terms of those roles is about 150,000. Now, I did think this question might come up, so I had a little look at what councillors' allowances are on Worcester City Council, and the total allowances in the council here is 250,000. So you manage a budget of 14 million and about 300 staff. The PCC manages a budget of 300 million and 4,500 staff. I just offer those up as comparators, really. So, but obviously, when you get to the county council, it's even more the council cost. Governance, there is a cost of governance, and I'm sure no one would think that the role of councillors were not necessary and that council officers could just manage themselves. I would offer the same critique around the police service. So I offer those as helpful comparators. In terms of road driving standards, in addition to speeding, John funds a whole range of initiatives to try and improve road safety in West Mercia. He provides a programme that helps with young drivers to improve their awareness and skills. He also works with older drivers to offer expertise. I've been on, as you might imagine, I've been out and seen the work of these. There was a virtual reality headsets that John has bought to help deliver this training, which helps elderly drivers understand hazards on the road and how they might respond to those. We fund a whole range of other initiatives. John had a road safety grant round last year, which gave out, I think, about £250,000 across West Mercia, which funded a whole host of initiatives, but including VAS signs, including small engineering works. We've also funded the TrueCam technology, which is revolutionised the way that speeding enforcement is dealt with, so that that can now be taken by a single officer rather than what was a 3-officer job in the past, where one person would be having to stand with a gun and 2 officers would be down the road pulling them in and issuing them with a notice of intended prosecution. Now that can be done by a single officer with a piece of technology which collects all the data that's relevant, evidence-based. You pop it into a cradle and the notices of intended prosecution pop out. So again, able to respond to community concerns much more easily. I don't know what else you'd like to add, Ed?
A couple of things really. So education. So you'll have seen the previous campaign called, it was Dying to Drive, now called Your Impact, delivered in unison with the fire service. So young drivers and people who are yet to learn to drive are taken to mocked up crime scenes, really emotive, really impactful. The feedback from young people, often the most harshest and honest of critics of us, overwhelmingly positive. And then secondly, what I think the public should expect from the police force, enforcement, and we should never be apologetic of enforcing the laws. I would much prefer for my officers to issue a ticket to somebody who's speeding or somebody who's on their mobile phone, as opposed to knocking on the door of a family to provide a death message. And people say, oh, don't be so dramatic. We've seen the devastating consequences of that happens. It's not just speed on fast roads. It happens anywhere and everywhere, and West Mercia has their fair share. And you know, one fatality on our roads is one too many. So therefore, we should never be apologetic about enforcing the law. That happens through business as usual, but also then through dedicated road safety operations that happen throughout the year.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I'm just going to follow up that question to yourself or to Ed in terms of...
Can I bring Gareth in? Because Gareth had got a couple of additional points just on that, if it might help in terms of answering. Road safety, are you satisfied with your answer, Councillor?
I just wondered if you thought 194 road collisions in Worcester was acceptable.
Yes, that's a question for me, and the answer is, of course, it's not. No road collisions are acceptable. That's why we're working to constantly drive them down.
The only thing I was going to add, so agreeing with Mark in terms of everything that we can possibly do in terms of funding outside of policing is done, and one of the initiatives that has proven increasingly popular that I would just gently plug, if I may, is the company that runs speed awareness courses are basically making the same courses available for free for anyone who wants to do them online. So they've been working with us for a while now to either go out in person or to put events on online where people can do road safety refreshers, regardless of whether they've committed any offending or not. So details on our website, and we'll happily circulate them if they're of interest. And the final thing is we are desperately wanting to work in partnership with local highway authorities and anyone else on this, because I, as a member of the public, effectively don't feel that we can police our way out of road safety issues. So we have got partnerships with Worcestershire and Herefordshire and other sort of highway authorities in the area where we have an initiative called Roads Focus, where we try and have a shared approach to tackling some of the problems. And we can always do more, but we are we're doing everything we can at the moment.
Sure. Thank you. I'm just going to ask a quick question. The question I had was in terms of, especially around mobile phone usage, there was talk and rumours around, obviously, cameras that could detect obviously people offending and whilst they're in their phones. Is there any truth to those rumours? Are they going to be installed on Worcestershire roads or in the city to help capture those offenders?
Not dedicated cameras for mobile phones. I'm certainly not aware of that. This would be down to responding to community concerns, tackling high harm routes, and on officers going about their daily business. The technology, I'm sure, does exist and will exist and will develop, but I'm not aware of any plans locally.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got three questions. The first question is just to ask how effective cooperation is working with neighbouring PCCs. And the reason I ask this question is because I work in West Brom, and it's obviously West Midlands, and we're obviously in West Mercia. And one of the issues I have to tackle within my role working in education is obviously county lines, and you do get young people in West Brom and in Sandwell sort of enticed into county lines, getting involved in taking drugs. And one of the destinations that they end up is Worcester. You know, they come down the railway line and they end up in Worcester. And I was prompted by this, by the story, you know, your good news story on page 13, because when you actually look at the addresses of the people involved here, you know, one's in Northfield, which is obviously in the West Midlands, and one obviously in Worcester, which is in West Mercia. So clearly, that is a good example of one of those crimes that does go across these kind of boundaries set between different police and crime commissions. It'd be interesting to know how effective the cooperation is with for example, the PCC for the West Midlands on an issue like county lines. And the second question is also about drugs. I mean, it was great to see on page 4 that the number of drug offences has fallen by 10%. But it'd be really interesting to see what the strategy is regarding, because again, in the article, the Good News article, this is about Class A drugs. But it'd be really interesting to know what the strategy is when it comes to soft drugs, you know, when it comes to cannabis, because I've had to deal with a series of issues with, for example, platform housing, where I've been going between platform housing and the police, because you've had someone in a platform housing accommodation smoking cannabis, impacting on their neighbour. And as a councillor, I've gone back and forth between the police and platform says, well, it's not our responsibility, it's the police's responsibility. And the police said, well, and you get the impression, rightly or wrongly, that the police almost think cannabis is something that is so prevalent in modern society that they're not really tackling it. And clearly there's been a lot of story about sort of experiments in London, etc. So it'd be really interesting to know what West Mercia Police's attitude is towards cannabis, because there is almost a feeling that it's not being tackled and it is seen as kind of we're not going to deal with it. You know, it's so prevalent. And the third question is the one I ask every year, and I will ask this, is obviously I'm a councillor for Dines Green and Grove Farm. And, you know, as part of the visibility sort of slide you said there, you know, we're lucky on Dines Green to have a police post, and that does provide that visibility and that reassurance. You know, people say to me on Dines Green, they're really happy to have that police post there. But there's always rumours swirling around that it's going to be shut, it's going to be closed down. And so I'll ask the same question I asked last year and probably the year before and probably the year before that. Can I have a reassurance that the police post on Dines Green will not be closed down? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I can do a couple of those, and Gav's going to, I'm sure Ed will want to cover some of them as well. How effective is our relationship with neighbouring PCCs and neighbouring forces? It's very good, is the answer to that. I mean, we have a shared regional ROCU, which is our organised crime unit. So each force in the West Midlands, the 4 forces, contribute a significant number of officers. I was just trying to look it up how many it is, but a significant number of officers from West Mercia are placed into a central unit who work on that cross-border regional organised crime, and particularly around county lines and dealing with the arrangements, that the SOC, the serious and organised crime, that often is a part of that as well. There are 4 forces, there are differences between the two. In many ways, though, the issues are, you know, outside of the urban core, there are different issues, and therefore, it wouldn't be, in my view, helpful to have one policing model that was exactly the same across those. So we are able to flex, and the outer forces, Warwickshire ourselves and Staffordshire, obviously have that ability to deliver in large rural communities as well as the urban centre, but we do work together where it makes sense. I'll deal with the final point, which I think I've got some good news for you. Firstly, I'll give you the reassurance there's no change to the. I wonder if you might pass that on to your colleagues in the area who often float the thoughts that these things might be going. If he's missing in the public eye for at least 2 weeks, he obviously brings one of these to the fore. No, let's be clear. Everybody here is a witness. We're not doing that. In fact, there's good news for you, which is there's going to be, because of the neighbourhood policing guarantee, it means there's an extra 29 officers who are going into the safer neighbourhoods teams across West Mercia, and they're being focused on high harm areas. And Worcester's getting more than its fair share of those. We're getting 3 in the city of those 29 extra officers, and they're going into, please don't kill me, the other councillors who are here. Dines Green's getting 1. Cathedral Ward's getting 1, or Fort Royal, and Warndon, city centre, I should say, rather than Cathedral, but it's, same difference these days, isn't it? But yeah, so Dines Green is getting an extra PC, so in addition to the existing resources, so you are getting additional resources, as is Warndon, Old Warndon is. I hope that provides you with some reassurance. Ed, or Gareth, would you like to pick up the issue about drugs and the forces' conduct around cannabis particularly?
Yeah, happy to. So to provide the absolute confirmation, we wouldn't look to turn a blind eye to any drug offences, including the use of cannabis. The data and historical cases often tell us that a cannabis user can go on to form addictions of inverted commas, harder street drugs. So we would look to deal with every case on its merits. That might not be a direct use of the criminal justice system. That might be diverting to pathways, to drug and alcohol services. But we certainly would look to consider the individual vulnerabilities of the cases and the information intelligence reported. And I would urge communities, local councillors, local stakeholders to report concerns of any drug abuse offending, whether it be supply, whether it be possession, because they are serious offences. The harm that is caused, whether directly or indirectly, can often have an impact wide scale across local communities, and therefore I'd encourage that information to be fed into local policing teams for us to make that assessment and then to take the most appropriate course of action. It clearly is not as simple as saying we will do X for every case that is reported, but there is an opportunity to provide appropriate intervention and to hopefully break a cycle of addiction or to provide a pathway to an appropriate diversionary pathway.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to add a couple of brief points on the question on drugs, if I may. I will obviously defer to Ed on the operational side, and that's for the police force in the PCC's office with the and crime element of the PCC's role. It's something that we try to take a holistic, sensible approach to. And again, like the roads question earlier, I don't think we can enforce our way out of the systemic and societal problem of drug abuse. So some of the initiatives we have, so the PCC chairs Combating Drugs Partnership, which is a much more holistic approach in itself. Worcestershire benefits from fairly unique partnership, as far as I'm aware, between ourselves and Public Health at the County Council around continuity of care for people with substance misuse issues when they're leaving prison. Again, trying to prevent reoffending, that kind of thing. So there's always more we can do, but we are trying innovative, we're trying different, we're trying holistic to try and make sure we've got an approach that is fit for purpose in policing and beyond that as well.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Murray in terms of political fairness here. So, Councillor Murray, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question around violence against women and girls, if I may. So I'm committed to championing the needs of female victims of violence and abuse. I brought a white ribbon motion to the council, which I know aligns us with the Police and Crime Commissioner's office. I'm a trained domestic abuse champion with the Dawn Project, and I've advocated strongly for its vital role in supporting victims across Worcester. I'm encouraged to hear that the PCC has invested in services like the Dawn Project. What I want to ask is, will this be a long-term commitment, and how will you measure its effectiveness in making a difference to female victims of crime in our area? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The commitment to tackling violence against women and girls is both a national and local one. So the government has obviously made its commitment to halving VORG, and John has made a public commitment as part of his police and crime plan to place that at the very centre of our work with, in tackling both reducing crime and supporting victims. We fund through a mixture of Home Office and Ministry of Justice and John's own locally levied funds, the services that I outlined before. So there's the different ones get different amounts from different sources. John has always put DA as one of his high priorities around commissioning. I don't see that changing any time. It continues to be, domestic abuse is a marker in 1 in 5, roughly 1 in 5 of all crimes. It is a pandemic, it is an endemic problem in our society, and I see him continuing to want to focus on that. The specifics of the grants, though, some of those, because they're Home Office and MOJ, we effectively commission with the money we get. So I can't give an absolute guarantee. I mean, I'd love the government to commit to, as part of the CSR, we know what the MOJ is going to get and Home Office is going to get now. I'd love them to say to us, you're going to get this money for the next 3 years, and we could go out and commission all those services with a greater longevity, which would be great for the providers, great for the beneficiaries of the services. Unfortunately, like the last government, this government continues to give us annual grant letters, which outlines how much we're going to get on that. Last year, our MOJ services had a 4.5 or 5%.
Yeah, small reduction.
It was about 5% reduction in all of the grants. Now, it doesn't sound a lot, but obviously, when you were facing also the impact of continuing inflation in the services, it all adds up. So I can't promise that if we don't get the money that we can find it elsewhere, because budget is incredibly tight, but it is a real commitment for John, and I'm sure he will do absolutely everything to try to maintain that. Hope that's helpful.
That is, thank you. And how will you measure the effectiveness of?
We have, there are holding to account sessions, so a bit like your scrutiny activities. We have a monthly holding to account session with the Chief Constable, and VORG is one of those, a deep dive on VORG is one of those each quarter. So we have a specific section each quarter where myself and John, the force prepares a paper on key indicators in this area, and we hold the Chief Constable to account for what he's doing and what the service. We can only hold the Chief Constable to account. That's the way the Police and Crime Act is. And we constantly ask to review those key indicators, and I've got some of them on here I could dig through for you, but I can assure you it is a regular, deep focus of our activities, because it's such an impactful one on the amount of our resources as well. If we can do something about it, it will be good for all parts of society.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Gareth, I'm going to move on to the next speaker,
Sure.
if that's all right. Yeah. Councillor De Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I want to raise a serious concerns about the recent decision by the Police and Crime Commissioner to cut PCSO hours here in Worcester, with particular reference to Warndon, for obvious reasons, it's my ward, curtailing their shifts to finish at 8 p.m. instead of the current 10 p.m. And I do note from your slide that you've got a peak around 8 and then it drops off a bit, but actually it's still going on beyond 8 o'clock. This decision was made without public consultation or meaningful local input, and it strips our community of vital visibility and support in the evening hours when it's most needed. These cuts remove the everyday presence that makes residents feel safe, and they make a mockery of what local policing is meant to be. This isn't just about patrolling, it's about partnership. It's deeply disappointing that the Commissioner has chosen to make these changes without local consultation and with so little regard for the knock-on effect on youth services, community cohesion and frontline prevention. So as far as I see it, this is not a prudent change. It is short-sighted cost-cutting. It is Worcester residents across the city, but particularly in Warndon, who will feel the consequences. In what way does this decision reflect your stated commitment to partnership working, such as with the City Council Youth Intervention Team and commitment to early intervention? And I heard John Campion at a presentation earlier this year making that statement publicly. Early intervention, so important. So today I call on, because you're here, Mark, the Deputy PCC, first of all to reinstate the evening PCSO patrols at least until 10 p.m, pending proper public engagement. So public could recognise and reinforce the link between PCSOs and that youth outreach work and the joint outcomes that they achieve, and to work constructively with City Council partners instead of undermining essential community-facing teams already under pressure. We ask not for favours, but for fairness and for the respect that Warndon and its residents deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. And just to, I suppose, reiterate some of the points there, Mark, is that a lot of us have got really good relationships with our PCSOs in our local neighbourhoods, and we've been hearing direct feedback from the PCSOs in terms of actually how it affects them, their working patterns, and how it translate into the relationships that are going to be destroyed as a result of these changes. In terms of that, they know their communities off by heart, as you would expect. They're deeply entrenched in them. They know who the troublemakers are. They know how to tackle them. They know what time they come out, where they hide out, where they can interact with them and try to resolve some of the issues that members are kind of highlighting. So this is coming not just from us as councillors in realising the huge impact that it will have. It is coming from the frontline people in the force, from there, that are going to feel the impacts, not only in terms of their working patterns, but the impact that it's going to have onto their communities.
Perhaps I can gently correct a couple of myths, because I think there are a couple of things that Jill said which are not true. Firstly, this isn't a decision of the Police and Crime Commissioner. This is an operational decision of the Chief Constable. John is consulted on these things, but it is, the deployment of stuff is a Chief Constable issue, not a PCC one. Secondly, about consultation, this was included in the budget that was agreed back in February. The Police and Crime Panel, which is the statutory holders to account of the PCC, were fully cognizant of this. It was in the budget papers, these changes, so it wasn't done secretly. There is a significant consultation that happens each year around the budget, and all of the changes are in there. And thirdly, I think probably the biggest one is there's no reduction in PCC in PCSO hours. The hours of working shift so that they end at 8 o'clock, but their working week, 37 hours or 40 hours, will not reduce by 2 hours a day. Their deployment, so if they currently work on that shift from 12, starting at 12 and finishing at 10, they'll now pick up at 10 o'clock in the morning and finish at 8. So there's no reduction in hours. This is simply this is a reduction in shift allowance. I mean, we have to pay, if you require people to work past 8 o'clock, you have to pay them a regular shift allowance. And so by removing that shift allowance, they will finish at 8. The rationale for the Chief Constable's decision is the one that I showed you with a chart in terms of where is the peaks in terms of demand, and is it best to have PCSOs who don't carry force and don't have the power of arrest on our streets beyond 8 o'clock at night, rather than uniformed officers who have both, protection for themselves and also have the power of arrest. As I said, in terms of reassurance for Worcester, The good news for Worcester is that whilst there may be a reduction in PCSOs working past 8 o'clock at night, in our high harm areas, in those 3 wards where and particularly the ones you mentioned, there's going to be an extra PC with those warrant cards operating in each of those areas on those times. So there's for Worcester, and this isn't true of everywhere where this is changing, but in those 3 areas, there's quite a significant increase in the SNT force that's going to be available. But this is a matter that's still, the final thing is, this is a matter of still an open consultation, which the Chief Constable obviously has to consider the responses he gets in terms of changes, and I wouldn't want to guess what his final decision will be, but the PCC was consulted on this and was aware of this as part of the budget. But hopefully that sets the position straight. But Ed, if you want to add anything about these changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Deputy PCC. So there's no dodging this issue. If we were to take an alternative course of action, it would inevitably lead to posts being deleted from the organisation. So this change of working hours maintains the current number of PCSOs in West Mercia. It saves a saving of approximately £350,000 in the unsocial hours payment paid between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. And allows us to maintain our PCSO numbers. We are absolutely committed to safer neighbourhood policing in West Mercia. That is demonstrated by maintaining our police officer numbers, and not only maintaining them, but increasing them by 29 police constables, 2 sergeants going into our safer neighbourhood teams. This is across the force, not just Worcester, and redeploying current vacancies and looking to fill them as quickly as possible. So this has been a difficult decision to make. It's been one that has occupied many minds, but it's ultimately police forces cannot and will not go bust, and we have got a responsibility to make some difficult decisions in order to do that. And over the previous number of years, we've made a commitment to maintain those numbers of frontline officers and frontline PCSOs, and this decision, whilst controversial, whilst unpopular in some areas of the community, allows us to maintain those numbers. I am not here to kid anybody that it's an easy decision to make, but it is an essential one.
I think we'll agree to disagree on that. I mean, the fundamental point I think we're making here is that the relationship between the PCSOs that have in their communities and the difference that they can make in those extra 2 hours will far outweigh the increase in resources in terms of a police officer who will be a new person coming into each of those roles, who won't have a relationship, he'll have a different way of dealing with some of those issues, and may then move on in terms of career progression. The constant has been, because of the lack of funding over the years, has been the PCSOs. The PCSOs have done the job of regular police officers in terms of reassuring communities. They've been the ones on the front lines. They're the ones that are seen out in the peak hours, and that's what you're destroying here as a result of this.
Chairman, I might not have got across, but we're not those hours, the 40 hours that they were working. Your PCSOs who are working in Cathedral Ward or Fort Royal Road will still have 40 hours and they'll still be working. So the only difference is the hours that they're working. So instead of working from 8 o'clock in the night, past 8 o'clock at night, they'll now be working 2 hours earlier in the morning. So in terms of community relations, I would argue that they won't be engaging with different parts of the community, but that you've still got the same resource in each of your communities, no reduction.
Sure, but the point is, the key point, regardless of the evidence that suggests crime doesn't stop at 8 o'clock, it carries on, and that's the key fundamental differences in terms of the opinion. But I'll move on. Councillor Lewin next, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points, if that's okay. I really like your focus on policing with the community, and visibility and engagement is really important. When I was first elected, we didn't have a full number of PCSOs in the Arboretum, but we have now for a couple of years, and we're getting to know them really well, especially through the PACT meetings. I really appreciate them turning up to that. They have taken action on what we're finding in the area is modified exhausts on cars, causing lots of, I'd say, alarm and distress to residents, particularly when they're early in the morning or through the night as well. And it's unclear how we take action or what evidence you need or how we go about reporting this, but also why are cars persistently being able to do this and get away with it. The other thing is Hannah and I were two of the women who gave stories to Bike Worcester for International Women's Day last year and for cycling women. And this is because I think women are disproportionately impacted by the driver behaviour and other aspects of safety and security for cycling. And it's not to say that every driver is a problem for cyclists, but I'd like you to go on the Bike Worcester website and see there are over 100 stories from people who cycle in Worcester, and it gives you a real impression of, you know, driver behaviour, but also reflecting, you know, other things like poor infrastructure and safety concerns. But one of the things that I would like to know is, you know, there were changes to the highway code which impact cycling, and it seems that many drivers are not aware of them. One of them is the two abreast, and Hannah and I, when we cycle home tonight from this meeting, we will be two abreast, and we often get hooted, shouted at, and abuse from drivers for doing that, who don't appreciate that actually that is safer for us and makes us easier to pass. So the other thing is the neighbourhood, you know, your Neighbourhood Matters emails. I think they're excellent. And I really think, you know, sometimes you put in some really important things. We had an issue in the Arboretum. We have a continual issue of hawking. We have lots of elderly residents who are being pressured to buy goods, overpriced goods, from people. We've had a good response from the police, but I think those kinds of emails, you need to repeat the messages more and maybe not just rely on email. I've got residents who don't use email, so how else are you getting your message out? Thank you.
So thank you for the feedback around Neighbourhood Matters. I'd agree. I've been on the meeting this morning with one of the directors of the company as to how we develop that and evolve those services. The system is only as good as the information we put into it and the number of people that are signed up to it. It's a bit like an echo chamber, isn't it, around some of those key messages. I absolutely accept your point around some people don't use email, some people don't, or are concerned about technology in terms of how they access their information. And for me, yes, there's an opportunity to knock on some doors and to do that. I think that's a naive answer if I was to say that's the only approach, because it's unrealistic. But it's about how we then share those messages on Neighbourhood Matters with neighbourhood watch groups, local community contacts, to reach out to those maybe vulnerable members of the community that aren't as readily accessible then, if that's the right term, through social media, through WhatsApp messaging, or through email. So I think it's a combination of a number of different methods as opposed to relying on one and saying that's a tick box and that satisfies everyone's needs, because clearly there's many different complexities, and depending on what the message is, of course. If we are sending a message, and I agree, it's about getting the right balance in terms of not feeling so you're spamming an individual of repeated messages, but quite often we have to repeat messages to ensure that that message lands. So the impact of courier fraud when somebody is ripped off, exposed, and often has devastating consequences, often that's through email scams. Then sending advice around that platform, absolutely people can be, well, hang on a minute, is this a genuine email? What does that look like? So I think we've got to be perhaps more fleet of foot and more responsive and recognise that wider range of communication channels that are available to our local policing teams, but also through partnerships, and recognising that it's not just the police service to share those messages. So it's through yourselves, it's through local charities and local key stakeholders that can help echo that message across policing. I appreciate that's only one part of your question.
Shall I have a go at the the bikes. Yeah, I mean, vulnerable road users are a constant focus of John's work in terms of road safety. In fact, we're having 4 evening focus groups with different types of vulnerable road users, motorcyclists, horse riders, pedestrians and cyclists. John and I are both vulnerable road users in different ways. He's got a motorbike, I've got a horse. So we both know, and the issue you mentioned about riding 2 abreast is equally true of horse riders as well as cyclists. It's safer, but you get the same sort of abuse about blocking the road. So totally understand what you're saying. Really trying to work with all of the representative groups. So Bike Worcester, I saw they had a little bit of a kicking in the press today, but overall my experience of working with them has been very positive, and we've funded a number of activities to try to see what we can do to improve the safety of cyclists. They are very vulnerable on our roads, and we do everything. We will continue to do anything we can to help. Katie Collier came at a recent meeting. We held joint meeting with all the key partners to try and do something to improve road safety, instigated by Worcester. So a commitment to carry on working in that way and recognise the points you're making very valid. Shall we move on, Chairman?
Yeah, we'll move on. We've got Councillor Wilmore next, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to thank the Office of the PCC for the road safety grant that we received last year. We purchased equipment for 3 schools totalling over £2,000. I'd also like to pay tribute to our Baton Hall and Nunnery SNT, who continue to be present, responsive, and are a real asset to the force. In this committee last year, when I asked about rooting out misogyny within West Mercia, your boss told me that he wanted to be judged. The litmus test for him was the swiftness with which people who displayed those behaviours were ejected from the force. A disciplinary hearing this month found that former PC Nathan Rogers repeatedly made highly offensive, derogatory and inappropriate sexual remarks towards female colleagues, plural, over a prolonged period of time. According to West Mercia, he was afforded ongoing learning opportunities and informal interventions while he continually harassed his female colleagues, no doubt making their working lives a misery. They were only spared by his resignation, with the actual disciplinary process taking 2 years. And as he did resign, I assume he isn't included in your dismissal figures in your report. How many instances and for how long are female staff expected to tolerate this behaviour before a misogynistic colleague is removed? So if the PCC wanted to be judged for the swiftness of how misogynistic officers are rejected from the force, my question is, on this occasion, has West Mercia failed its own litmus test?
Thank you very much, and it's a very serious issue that you raise. I'm not going to comment on the individual case, although it is obvious from the way that all of those who go through the disciplinary process and are found guilty, that information is shared publicly, and that they are placed obviously on the barring list, so that they never work in our force or any other force again. So action is taken. In terms of police misconduct, the whole process is heavily regulated. Regulations play a very significant part in a police officer's life. They guide our hands in terms of, I mean, it is a matter for the force. We have some role in the disciplinary process, but it is essentially a force process, and they have to follow agreed national processes that all police officers are bound by. So whilst it is very frustrating that the cases can take so long to come to judgment, there is relatively little that at a local force level, either the Chief Constable or the BCC can do to speed them up. The resources are there. Our PSD resources, a Police Professional Standards Department, we've increased the resources there so that the cases can be built faster. But obviously, officers who are served papers under regulations have rights. They also know the system of how to sometimes, elongate the process before judgment is given. But you're absolutely right, there is no place for misogyny in today's police force, and we will continue to call it out and continue to throw them out when the cases are found. I mean, I couldn't be clearer in terms of, you know, how important this is as an issue, but you have to, if you don't follow regs, you of course fall foul of any appeals process. So you have to follow police regulations. So it's not a West Mercia issue. If you spoke to West Mids or to Gloucestershire, you'll find that they are equally frustrated. There have been some changes around independent legally qualified chairs have now been replaced by internal senior officers who chair the panels, which has helped speed up the disciplinary process in some cases. But you're right to say in some cases they take a very long time to come to judgment. I don't know if you wanted to say anything extra.
Just very briefly, really. So I'm a great believer that we should intervene at the earliest opportunity when misconduct is reported at the most appropriate level. So when the police get a report of misconduct through internal channels or through external channels into the organisation, it's subject to an assessment made in PSD, and then dependent on what is the conduct that's been alleged, that individual is then subject to a suspension hearing chaired by our Deputy Chief Constable to, now suspension isn't an indication of guilt, but it is a neutral act enabled to ensure independence of the investigation and to take appropriate action. What I will say is that we have worked really hard over the last certainly 2 years to grow our internal support networks. So we've got the WOW, which is the Women of West Mercia, a really active and vocal support group chaired by a colleague who I work very closely with. And I smile because I chair the He for She group, so standing up for gender equality. And we've made a commitment, probably 2 years ago now, that this isn't about men helping in a condescending manner, coming over the hill and saying, we'll support you. This is about men influencing other men to act differently and, importantly, to work alongside our Women of West Mercia to do things together. And that's not just about tackling sexist misogyny, albeit that's a dedicated pillar of what the He for She group work towards. It's tackling issues around health and it's tackling issues around representation. So the more I get involved in that work, and I'm really passionate about it, the more you realise you've got to do. And I don't think you ever get to a position where we finish it and go, congratulations, look at us, we've got a perfect culture. There are areas of our culture that, from previous cases, that we're not proud of. But we absolutely, I think it's really important for student officers and the current officers coming through the organisation to show that we've got appropriate networks to give them the confidence to report out and to call out inappropriate behaviour. But then when we do, appropriate action and intervention is taking place, whether that's suspension, whether it's gross misconduct, or early intervention, depending on what's reported.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time. They've got 2 remaining speakers, and those will be the last ones. Councillor Lawrence and then Councillor Jagger.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation and for giving up your time, 3 of you, this evening. My question relates to the questions already been asked by Councillor Murray relating to the Dawn project. So there's a bit of a preamble, bear with me. There's a genuine question at the end. So in the Communities Committee meeting on 24th of July 2024, councillors received a report in which it was stated that the Police Crime Commissioner had allocated £39,000 for the Dawn project in 2023. You said this evening that the most recent PCC allocation for Dawn was £30,000. That's a £9,000 reduction. To offer a comparison, you said that the PCC salary is over £70,000, your own salary is £52,000, and I believe that the assistant PCC receives £20,000. Worcester Community Trust launched a crowdfunder to raise funds to ensure the Dawn project's survival. I've personally since seen a Dawn Inclusion Domestic Abuse project worker role being advertised, though I believe that this was a temporary contract and hourly paid, and only until March 2026. So the question is, how might the Police Crime Commissioner make savings so that a greater contribution can be made towards the Dawn project to help guarantee its long-term future? Thank you very much for bearing with me.
Thank you, Neil, and pleasure to see you. Thank you for your question, as always, prescient. Dawn is a Worcester-specific project. As I said in my opening remarks, we spend well over £3 million supporting domestic abuse survivors and perpetrators to change their behaviour. So in the grand scale of our activities, we fund, this is relatively small in terms of comparison to that. So there is a universal service. Appreciate that Dawn's locally grown and much loved, but what are the services the majority of DA victims and perpetrators who access services in the city are funded directly by the PCC already. The numbers that come through the programmes I talked about would far outnumber the Dawn numbers. Now, we do continue to fund Dawn through that 30,000 grant which comes through the CSP, which the CSP allocates, but it is the PCC's money. Now, domestic abuse is a joint endeavour trying to tackle this issue. I don't know, and I won't speculate that whether Worcester City Council puts any money in directly yourselves, but of course it isn't just our responsibility, it's your responsibility, it's public health in the county council, it's a whole range of partners. And for local projects, they're going to need a partnership approach. So I would encourage you in your budget build this year to put continue to put your hand in your pocket. I don't know if you put any money in. I know you're going to say you haven't got any money, great. It's a Worcester-specific project. You're a Worcester-specific partners. That is fantastic. We will continue to provide the CSP with money. If the CSP wants to add additional resources from its allocation to the Dawn, you're at liberty to do so as well. Our budgets are incredibly tight. You've already asked about PCSO, changes in hours and other activities. I've talked to you about the CSR and the reduction in grants that we got from Ministry of Justice last year. All of these things add up. We are desperate to continue to fund things where we can, but I'm afraid when you look at domestic abuse funding in the round in Worcester, we are taking the lion's share, as you rightly would expect, but we are putting the lion's share in already. So continue to focus, and if there are ways of finding efficiencies, in our current budget, we've taken 9 posts out of the OPCC's office, roughly worth, I think, about 300,000. So we've continued to try and lean our structures, as is the force, but it is a ongoing battle, and I'd like to join forces with you to lobby the government for a better settlement for the Home Office, if you'd like to do that.
Yeah, I just want to correct Councillor Lawrence, and Worcester City Council don't put any money towards the Dawn project. It is Public Health Commission service. So,
Well, I recall in that meeting a year ago that it was a very similar pot of money from this council, but I'll check. I've not got it in front of me, so I'm not going to open up another debate. And if you're correct, then I stand corrected.
sure, you can get that.
But I remember two very similar pots of money, and there was a slight marginal greater contribution either from this council or the body that you've just mentioned, and it was £2,000, £3,000 more than the PCC contribution. But the night is long already. Let's move on.
Not a problem. And final speaker, Councillor Jagger, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to ask just one question. The question is about, I'm seeing here your data saying very positive numbers about victim satisfaction. And I'm curious as how you define a victim. I'm going to tell you why I'm asking that question. About a year ago, when I was first elected, 3 men broke into my garden in my house. They came in, they wouldn't leave. They proceeded to urinate all over my garden. I called the police. I was told that as I was on the phone, the young men left my garden, and I was told that this did not merit a police visit because they had just left. Eventually, I had some conversations that said there were just some drunk kids. I was felt quite vulnerable because I was on my own. I had just been elected. My address was a matter of public record, and I had attracted some unhelpful or unwelcome attention. So I'm curious as to whether I would have been classified as a victim in that situation, because I was clearly not satisfied with that response. And so what is the definition, and how do you know that crime is actually going down rather than statistically just looking like it's going down because there is less classification of something as a crime? Thank you.
How do I know the crime's going down, not just the definition? The best survey of, or the best evidence around crime is the Crime Survey of England and Wales, which is longitudinal, it's conducted independently, and it has got, you know, it is very, all the clear thinkers in the sector accept that that is the best measure of crime. That has a long-term decline in crime, not just the last 14 or 15 years, but stretching back significantly longer than that. So in terms of how can I evidence it, that I would say is one piece of it. In addition to that is what's reported crime, which follows, each force has a detailed, there's Home Office guidance on how to classify crime, which each force has to adhere to. And our inspectorate, or the police's inspectorate, HMIC, FRS, they, when they come and do their appeal inspections, they check that you are correctly coding. They go back through the records, they randomly pick a sample, and they go and see whether each crime has been correctly coded. In our appeal report, there was no serious issues in terms of crime reporting. So there's a validation there. Crime rules do change over time, and how they, each government, each Home Office, each Home Secretary does issue fresh guidance on those, and there is some change in those. Sometimes things that you wouldn't class as a crime are crimed because of the way the Home Office guidance requires it. So there is some issues in that. Would you have been counted? I strongly believe you would have been counted, because whilst they didn't deploy, the call taker will have noted that, and it will have been dealt with beyond you would have been issued with a crime number, whether you were given it or not, but there will have been an incident code around those. So how do we measure as part of satisfaction? All of those are, we commissioned an independent survey that looks about crime, that collects and data on satisfaction by crime type. Do you want to add any more, Gareth, on that one? Because it's quite a complex area.
I'll need the microphone.
Okay.
There isn't much to add. I think Mark's right in terms of classifications change. Totally non-political point, I promise, but we saw it when I believe the Conservative government were elected or the coalition government in 2010, where recording rules changed almost overnight, and we saw big spikes in recorded crime, and the narrative obviously changes to crime is on the up, when actually the Crime Survey of England and Wales is seen as the authoritative and more definitive measure. What you would ideally like is the CSEW to match recorded crime levels, because then you know that you're getting a good like-for-like comparison. There are some areas of crime that I believe are better reported than others, like home burglaries, for example, because people need crime reference numbers to claim on home insurance, that kind of thing. But things like domestic abuse, for example, or ASB, very underreported still. So not an exact science, and I would defer to Ed on when things are crimed specifically and what are victims defined as, because that is not my area of expertise, I'm afraid.
So you're right. So Mark has explained the incident recording. So every call received in our control room, we create an incident record, or a contact record initially, and then if it is an incident, i.e. something that we need to either record as a crime, which is different to an incident, it generates an incident and a reference number that hopefully you were given. And then subject to what's recorded, i.e. told to the police by that call taker, those logs are then reviewed by our a small team of designated decision makers to ensure that we record the most appropriate crime. So it's not just recording any crime, it's the crime that is reported on the log. So it's a Home Office counting rules process. It can be seen as quite a dry subject, but it's important to get it right for victims. And then, therefore, if we don't record it correctly, we can't necessarily then provide the right levels of support and intervention. So I can't comment on your individual case, but happy to take it away and have a look.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I'm just going to kind of sum up, I think, in terms of that. First of all, I'd like to thank, obviously, Mark, Ed and Gareth for being here and answering everybody's questions. I'd like to personally thank whoever made the decision to keep a local police officer called Kieran Williams on in Cathedral. He's an excellent local police officer. I know he had some issues in terms of training, etc. What the rules and regulations in terms of the route that he came down, but he has demonstrated above and beyond what a good local police officer is. Deeply rooted in the communities that he serves, really, really sensitive, has gone above and beyond in terms of helping us in Cathedral, in Fort Royal and across areas across this. He's a model police officer and we are really, really pleased, and I'm especially pleased that the Chief Constable has decided to keep him on. And it's when we talk about relationships, it's those relationships that absolutely make the difference between a judgment call on a sensitive issue and going in heavy-handed. And then we need more of those kinds of police officers in terms of that. Credit where credit obviously is due in terms of the work that the police are doing. It's an increasingly thankless task with diminishing resources, and the pressure that has been put on police forces is well too known. And obviously thanks to all those on the front line that are sacrificing for us. Obviously, you've picked up the concerns in terms of Worcester City, in terms of PCSOs. Sexual crime still are going on the up here, whether that's the increase in confidence for people, young women, to be able to report those, or whether they're actually going up because crimes government remains to be debated. But we are creating a culture where it's it's easy to talk about these things, to report them, and to get some results. And hopefully you can extend that commitment John can extend that commitment in trying to address those issues. But yeah, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And, it's not a problem. I think it was really important everybody had the opportunity to ask those questions. We don't get the opportunity obviously here because obviously the official body is up here at County Hall. You're welcome to stay, but I'm sure you want to go. All right. We're going to take a short break after this. If you take a break for 10 minutes, please, then, committee. Yep. Thank you then. We'll move on to agenda item 6, quarter 4 annual performance report.
Thank you, Chair. Conscious of time, Chair, just very quickly, this is the last quarter's performance report from 24-25. The key projects and actions are all showing green, so they've either been concluded or they are progressing on track. More of a mixed picture in terms of the key performance indicators, but there's narrative against each of those, which explains why we are coming in at those levels and what we intend to do to try and improve the situation. And just a reminder that we've got a report on the agenda this evening around housing enabling, housing growth, and DFGs and the PIL contract. So members may want to hold questions back for those reports.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor. Are there any questions on the quarter 4 performance report? Councillor Lawrenson and then Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lloyd. Just want to check that I'm reading it correctly. It's page 20 on the performance report about housing. Just check I've got the right page number. Yeah, page 20. Just to check my understanding. So it says the number of households on the register is not the most useful indication of housing outcomes because such a large proportion of applicants are in the lower bandings and therefore unlikely to receive an offer of social housing. So my question is, are they on a waiting list for a house that they'll never move into? Or have I just misinterpreted that?
Chair, Tom may want to come in and provide a more technical answer, but yeah, quite bluntly, with 4,500 people on the waiting list and half of those in what we call non-priority bandings, then the chances of them ever receiving a housing offer is next to zero.
And I think I've raised it on a number of times, Councillor Lawrence, in terms of the blunt reality is that actually that is the case. We just haven't got enough supply to meet all the demand in terms of that. And even though if you are on the top tier in terms of that, you know, and that's a competitive bidding process in itself, let alone those on tier 2 and those that fall below. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at page 23, where the percentage of successful homelessness preventions has dipped. And I know there's some reasons given for that. But I just wanted to put on record how very unhelpful I found the social landlords in situations like this. And it seems to me that people like Platform, they have tenancy, well, no, Citizen have successful tenancy teams and Platform have something similar called something else. They, I think, should be stepping up more than I have seen evidence of. So, very quick case in point, it's obvious that wheels are going to come off because someone's moving on to universal credit and she's a vulnerable person. So flag that up straight away to Platform. I hear last week that despite everybody trying their best and getting information in the right place, an eviction notice was served. Because rents are being withheld by universal credit because they can't get the name right. Platform haven't got the right name on their system. So, you know, having had several months warning that this is going to go wrong, can you step in and help? To actually hear that eviction notice is served when they're in the middle of speaking with members of your team to try and resolve the issue, I find unbelievable. And it's not the first sort of thing I've heard from some of the social landlords. Is there any step we can take to encourage them to look at their processes, to stop doing a one-size-fits-all because a certain button has been pressed, and to treat people like human beings?
Yeah, I mean, we engage regularly with Platform and all of the registered providers. We try and get early indication of any potential risk of homelessness, work with them. They do have their own teams to intervene and resolve risks of homelessness, a lot of which goes sort of undetected before it comes to us. So it's difficult for me to comment, I suppose, in the detail of how many cases are resolved before they reach us and how many reach us, but we very much work in partnership with them to try and prevent cases reaching us in the first place.
Thanks, and thanks for raising that point, Councillor Sarah. I think there is a case in point in terms of legacy systems and custom CRM models that exist within certain social housing providers, and that when they become too big, those systems don't talk to each other. Data often gets logged incorrectly. There's no fallback mechanism of verifying it or checking it, and the systems don't talk to each other. Hence, we get the tragedy of the incidences that we do come through us, and in the worst case scenarios, they lead into incidents like this in terms of that. Whereas actually, one of those systems has recorded the constant contact that the customers were made with them, whilst the other one hasn't. So it's a simple, I would say, a simple mechanism of checking what the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, which leads to the tragedy that we're facing. Councillor Louis? Sorry, Councillor Cooper, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I've got several questions. My first question is page 32 at the top, which talks about tennis in parks and pay for participation. I note in Gulliver Park, just today, there's been a banner gone up for free tennis. But for several months, there's been no notice board at all. So probably 6 months. So I'm wondering how, if someone walked past that tennis court, that they would know how to book that tennis court. So could we get that notice board back up, please? Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I'll raise that with Alan New to pick that up with Freedom Leisure.
Yeah, sure. And I think there's a promotion coming from City Council pretty soon around that as well, in terms of free tennis for Wimbledon as well. All right, Councillor.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I've just got two points. On page 12, we've got the community events, and I'd like to say that I'd like to thank all the community officers who've worked so hard on all these events for so long. I mean, what an outstanding number of events. When you see it like that, you realise, across the city, that's incredible. But I am concerned. We had a Gallivant stakeholders meeting last week, and one of the big aspects that we were talking about is how can we continue delivering community events when we don't have a community officer support. And in somewhere like Gallivant Park, where we've got a Rotary Club and we've got the regiment and the Friends, I think we can probably work together to find a solution. But there are going to be events such as, say, in the Arboretum, the Canal Group and the Arboretum Residents Association, who run something and are used to having a van come with tables, literally that, and they're not going to have that. So how are we going to run events like that? So that's the first question. I'll be really disappointed if this goes. And then on page 19, you've got a target for affordable homes. And I'm just wondering whether, I'm looking at the values that we're getting and we're way off the target. And I'm just wondering whether, when you look at the new South Worcestershire Development Plan, is it likely that we are going to achieve 200 in any year soon? And do the units which would come on Sansom Walk count? This is a big site for the city. It's 40 units, I think. But obviously it's stalling. And basically, is there a way we can get this development to hurry up? Because obviously, if there is part of these numbers, 40 is a huge amount of your target, which we need to get. Thank you.
Chair, I'll let James pick up on the second point once I've answered the first. Chair, I think we'd all want to be able to provide and continue to provide the same level of community engagement that we have in years gone past. Just a reminder, it is a discretionary service. It's not a statutory service, and unfortunately, the council has to cut this cloth accordingly. So to answer the question directly, can we continue to do what we've always done? The answer is no. We're just working through what the community engagement offer looks like for the council. It's not all about direct delivery. It's about working through other organisations and promoting other organisations and supporting them in different ways. So we'll do everything we possibly can to ensure that the level of activity takes place. It's just necessitating less direct delivery by the council themselves. But over the next couple of weeks, we'll do some work around being able to share with members what that looks like, so we can manage expectations accordingly.
Sure. Just on that point as well. Don't forget the ABCD money and the team. That was an externally grant-funded project that kind of came to an end, and a lot of good work was done as a result of that. And the whole point of that ABC model was the empowerment on a local level, that groups would become self-sufficient, that would be able to have the capacity to be able to then take on and apply for bids of funding, get organised in terms of that. And obviously some parts of that, like the groups that you highlighted, have managed to be able to do that. Some are, not at that stage. Want to remain at a smaller level. So we have different varying needs across the group, and fully appreciate that. It's something that's close to my heart. The reality is, as explained, that funding has run out, and we have to make some tough decisions. And I've highlighted this again and again. Various people have come up with concerns regarding various aspects, but no plan comes forward in terms of how are we going to supposed to fund it, or what else are we going to cut as a result of it. So if we're serious about it, then come forward some proposals. Comes forward some proposals of what do we replace in terms of it. Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This sort of feeds into the next committee item, but as you've asked the question, I might as well pick it up now. Yes, you're right. I mean, it's not just Sampson Walk. Sampson Walk is due to complete this financial year, but it won't. Probably in its original conception, it was due to complete last financial year. Obviously, there have been some issues with ground contamination, which have delayed the project. We are working with Sanctuary to just understand why it's taking so long. I would also highlight another site that should have completed last financial year and would have added to our figures, which is Broomhall Way, phase 1 with rooftop. And that's up to 80 units there of affordable housing. That's been delayed because of the relationship with the bigger St Malbwins type commercial developers and the relationship between the transport plan, etc., etc. Again, I think there are lessons to be learned from the RP there, but that will complete this financial year, which is good news. But they have been held up considerably in terms of some of the sort of transport infrastructure and the sign off the highways plan. So it's we need to learn lessons from this, and you're right, as we move forward towards larger complex sites, Shrub Hill, Worcester Parkway, these sites which are probably factored in now, I think all these completed in 10 years, 15 years, we may be seeing them 25 years, which is not going to help anybody, particularly when we're reliant on those sites to deliver most of our affordable housing, because that's where we get most of our affordable housing, Section 106. So yes, that's a good point. Thanks.
Quick point, Councillor Cooper, before we move on.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wondered how long it takes for HMO licensing to be, suspected unlicensed HMO, how long that would take to be inspected. And my second question is, with the cycle marking, how many of those we can expect to see this year with reduced officer staff, and would it be possible to train volunteers? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, the first point, HMOs, yeah, sorry. So yes, we do both proactive and reactive work in relation to identifying unlicensed HMOs. So if they're reported to us, we would begin the investigation essentially immediately. It would be allocated to a property standards officer. Generally speaking, there's some background checks, and then that would lead to contacting the landlord and arranging an inspection of the property. So essentially it would happen very quickly. Property marking, again, there will be some reductions. The figures and the targets set for the past financial year need to be reviewed and revised. I think we have set revised targets for the coming for the coming year in the committee scorecard. Whether we need to review and revise those targets remains to be seen, but I couldn't give you a figure of what we would expect over the course of the coming year. And the final point was training volunteers. Potentially, yeah. I mean, we're open to suggestions and recommendations, and one of the points, like Lloyd mentioned a few minutes ago, is around building capacity and how we can deliver things in a different way, so whether that's through other organisations, through volunteers. So yeah, we're certainly exploring all of those options.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the item? We're happy to note the annual performance report. Yeah, thank you. Noted. We'll move on to the agenda item 7 then, Worcester City Housing Enabling Strategy, 6 monthly. James, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. The recommendation for this report is the 6-month update report. We recommend that the contents of the report are noted, and in particular note the intention to bring a scoping review of the housing enabling strategy as it draws to a close to the next committee. Just as background, we have previously Community Committee followed the format of the housing enabling strategy itself and repeated and just gone through the various goals and targets, which has become quite long-winded and repeats reference to a lot of actions that have been completed or just simply ongoing. So we have elected to focus on what we're doing now, and the broader context is set out within the appendix of the report. So the housing enabling strategy was adopted in June 2023, I believe, for my time, and we've carried out 6 months update reports ever since. And the intention of the strategy in the first place was to set up a strategic framework and delivery plan to support the delivery of additional affordable housing throughout the city. It's interesting, as it's become clear as we've moved through the nearly 3-year process now, that actually the way we saw it when the strategy was initiated was really we were reliant on our delivery partners. But of course now we've come to understand that actually if we want to do stuff, particularly small sites and acquisition programs, we're really going to take the lead ourselves, which is what we've been doing. And we started from a rosette, from a zero position and sort of built it up. So if we just move on to what we've completed over the last 6 months, one of our main operational action points is the local housing fund, which supports people coming through the Afghan relocation program, previously the Ukrainian relocation program, and also homeless households. So we get grant from Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government to buy properties to support families to secure accommodation in this country, etc., as well as our own homeless households. Now, we've acquired 3 properties. We've got 4 properties under offer, and we're in discussion with MHCLG about converting our grant to also secure a sort of 5-person accommodation for single homeless, which will actually up the number of properties we're able to deliver. Obviously, the numbers are small at the moment, but we have been able to sort of gain credibility with the ministry for delivering properties, and we started off with 2 last financial. This year we'll do 7, so next year we'll be able to apply for even more grant and deliver more properties. So it's about convincing the grant funders that we know what we're doing, but also convincing internally, because we've got no money in the council, therefore this stuff needs to break even pretty much statewide. I know that's a technical, but we need to be delivering a surplus from day one. So we have to be quite clever and creative about how we acquire properties. So we've managed to do that. So it's been good for us, and I think it's a program that will only expand. And as we go on, we'll start to generate our own surpluses, which can then support the program. We've also been looking at a couple of council-owned sites, and we're undertaking feasibility exercises with those sites at the moment in order to get to a stage where we can go for a formal pre-application discussions with planners. We know what the art of the possible in terms of the developable space is, and you know, the constraints, not just of planning, but also the technical constraints. So we know realistically what we're going to be able to get on the site. Then we need to understand how we finance that, because building on the sites we've got is going to be a bit more expensive than just going and buying a property off the open market, unfortunately. But there is quite a lot of government support out there at the moment to support this type of operation. So that's where we are with that. The other thing we are doing as well is through the Worcestershire Housing Strategy, there are two streams, one of which is a housing growth stream. So we're increasingly working with our neighbouring authorities to look at what they're doing, because they're experiencing the same problems as us in terms of delivery. You know, South Worcestershire, Kidderminster, sorry, and Redditch and Bromsgrove. And it's quite interesting that they are actually taking the same approach, even though it's small scale. So Wychavon more, there's a little bit of acquisition going on. Redditch have their own housing stock, so they're more active anyway. They've got a housing revenue account. So we're looking at where we can share resources and expertise and actually deliver a critical mass. A big thing for us, of course, as we grow our portfolio, is we don't have a management service. Now, we've been managing it all in-house with the few units we've got, but there comes a point in time when it's going to become slightly unrealistic. So that's quite an interesting for us to move on. The summary of outturns, I mean, I think the main, as you can see, we talked about a lot of this is setting up the infrastructure that's being delivered. That's why we're not directly reporting on it. Goal one, which is probably the most, well, it is the most important goal because it's how much we're actually delivering. We've covered that in terms of the delay to sites. We've mentioned some of the key sites there. I think it's also worth making the point now that we have secured the units at Batten Hall Road site. They've gone to Bromford Housing, and, you know, congratulations to all parties involved, and we worked through that very well. So that's a good news story. And that the detail of all that is picked up in the appendix. In terms of moving forward, I think our focus is on the sites we're looking at, and we really, in a couple of weeks, we want to sit down with planners to see what we can get on site, and then we'll be able to look at the feasibility aspects to it. We'll continue with local authority acquisition, local authority housing con acquisition, and if we manage to acquire units earlier enough within the financial year, we may have the opportunity to pick up some slippage funding, particularly if we have some sort of opportunities present themselves. And of course, we will be looking at how our enabling strategy, or maybe our development strategy moving forward, just to look at options for members at the next committee to see how we progress, because it's still a priority for us. We're not, at the start of the enabling strategy, it was all big numbers and, you know, maps across the table and let's do this, you know, strategic alliances with big pension funds, but it's just not happened, but it's still a priority for us. So we need to see how we deliver within that context. And again, it's about partnership working with our partners. And that's really the update, Chair. I don't know if further questions to that.
Thank you, James. I'll open it up to questions first. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James, for the report. I'm going to ask a question that's probably, or it could be a question for my employer. I've got to be quite careful with this one. So it relates to 4B on page 4. So, and it's probably a variation of a question I've asked 2 or 3 times when this agenda item's come to the table, but I can't resist asking it anyway. You know, this council is working with registered providers to, and it says here, to speed up the delivery of affordable housing, which all of us, whichever our allegiance, wants to happen. We want more affordable housing, and we want it to happen quickly. Next to that target, so you've assured in the strategy that you've assured us that this is happening. We are having regular dialogue with registered providers. But then it says registered providers are not proactive in the market. I'm assuming that's the affordable housing market. And are reviewing growth strategies due to business plan constraints. So the question is, do you know what those constraints are? And sort of a comment in addition to that is, I'm wondering how they can have those restraints, because the organisation I work for has a £1 billion turnover. So it doesn't seem too constrained to me. So, you know, what are the constraints that are preventing large registered providers from building affordable homes? That's my question, really.
I think that when you look at a large organisation like Platform you work for, and I remember Platform when I was in the East Midlands being, sorry, I forget who they were then, but they were two smaller organisations, and obviously over here they were Fortis, oh, they're Waterloo, that's right, Waterloo and De Montfort in the East Midlands. Now they've become a big organisation, and really their strategic role is Worcester Parkway. It's potentially Shrub Hill, or it's the big sort of Birmingham city sites, or, you know, that's where they want. They're not interested in you speak to any, you know, head of development or development director of the housing association, they will tell you, you know, we won't look lower than 40 units. And even on Section 106 sites when they're buying, and that's the way it's gone, because they become larger and larger organisations, and they don't want to be competing on small sites. In terms of build cost, inflation is still incredibly high. The cost of development, the risk of subcontractors going under, etc., etc. I mean, it's all that sort of level of risk and cost, and I think they want that critical mass. Because, of course, your organisation, you know, they have to make them the metrics of a Platform or a Stonewater they have to make every single development they do stack up financially to keep the lenders happy, because they have to charge those units. So that's the arguments we'll get back, is that we have to satisfy our lenders, the banks, who we're borrowing money off, and unlike the local authority, when we borrow money and we don't actually charge it against anything, they have to charge it against the assets. So the lenders will want to ensure, and of course they're getting a subsidised rent back on that as well. So it becomes tighter. And also interest rates have gone up, they've not really come down. So whereas they were, you know, borrowing it a lot less, all of a sudden, and that doesn't just affect their development programme, it also affects the cost of maintenance, the cost of management, you know, so inflation, inflation, so it's not just build cost inflation, it's the inflation when you change a kitchen, or you change a bathroom, or you put a new boiler in. That's all the day-to-day, it's all gone up. Plus there's been pressure, sorry I'm over-answering this, aren't I? There's also the pressure to do a lot of the sort of refurb stuff that they've possibly not been focusing on. There's a lot of pressure around existing stock, so that's the answer.
Thank you for that bleak yet detailed answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jagger, and then Councillor Tissera, then Councillor Cooper.
My question is slightly related to this topic, and forgive me, I'm new in this committee, but I'm aware there were some pots of money that were available for cities like Worcester to build affordable housing, which we couldn't use because essentially we don't have enough land to build on. Are you aware of new programs to replace those pots of money that used to exist? Because my understanding that these have ended now. And I wonder whether there's been exploration of sort of building upwards. I imagine that would be very controversial in Worcester. People wouldn't want to see big tower blocks, but I just wonder if that is something that has been considered or thought about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Obviously, the government's had its announcement in terms of the affordable housing programme, the main affordable housing programme, which is the Homes England programme, ran from 2021 to 2026. Rachel Reeves has now allocated a lot of money towards affordable housing. So the majority of that will go to Homes England, but also the programmes such as the Local Authority Housing Fund that we directly draw down will hopefully receive funds as well. So there will be more money available, and hopefully the important thing to a registered provider is the grant rate per dwelling. If that goes up, then obviously it will mean the financing of their schemes is a lot easier. So hopefully they will look at schemes they potentially discounted before because they're getting more support from government to do it. And I think the government is aware that there is a problem here, that's, you know, speaking to parties that, you know, that are closer to government than I am, they know that essentially to meet their delivery numbers, they've got to be doing the 20, 30 unit sites, or they're simply not going to deliver their ambitions. In terms of building up, interesting point again. I mean, there are a couple of extant permissions in the city that haven't yet been delivered. Next to St Martin's Gate, for example, there was a permission now. I don't know whether it's elapsed now, but I saw a notice when I walked past it the other day, and I have to give that a closer look. Well, that's going up. I mean, it's not going up to 20 floors, but it's going up to to 8, 9. And of course, Sheriff's Gate is a high rise for the context of Derby, and that they've only just, you know, phase 1 is now a build to rent, and they are letting those properties at Sheriff's Gate. So hopefully that will encourage phase 2 of that to come through as a high rise development. But to be honest, registered providers are quite reluctant to look at high rise because they perceive it as a management issue. So it's more about the build to rent sector. But build to rent, you know, it introduces more competition into the private rental market, so it's not a bad thing. And you know, it's new build, so you know, it's high specs, energy efficiency, and all that sort of stuff. So, but yeah, the high rise thing is interesting, and I think in terms of numbers, certainly in bigger cities, Nottingham, where I'm from, that's Sheffield, for example, that's where they're going. A lot of it's student, of course, but you know, of course, in terms of your foot space, your ground space, it is a good way to go. And of course, on the continent, everybody builds high rise. You know, all the poor people live in low rise on the continent. It's funny, isn't it? In fact, throughout the world. Anyway, sorry, I digressed.
Okay, Councillor Sarah.
My question's been answered, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper then.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm looking for this when I can't see it. Perhaps it's just me. I wondered within this how many of these homes you expect to be accessible for disabled residents, please.
We're quite constrained in terms of financially, in terms of the homes we can go for. Certainly, my colleagues in homelessness and housing options are desperate for adapted housing or housing we can adapt, it's easily adaptable. We are looking at the moment at a property that is adapted, has a level access showers. So it's certainly something in terms of a priority in terms of what we're looking for. Obviously, as I've said, in terms of acquisitions, you know, you're buying what's out there on the market within the constraints we've got, but we do look at properties in terms of what we can potentially adapt, i.e. size of the garden, you know, whether they got an extra room, reception room, etc., etc. That does come into our thinking. We are looking at one at the moment, to answer your question.
So, okay, do we have any other questions on this item? No, I mean, I think the important thing to realise is actually the work that we started doing 3 or 4 years ago in terms of that, in terms of mapping, in terms of strategy, in terms of you know, sites, etc., is going to serve us well now. In terms of you know, although we haven't managed to realise as many sites as we originally kind of intended, the point is we've done all the hard work. The landscape on a national level, the importance of obviously house building and RSLs, the funding landscape has all changed in our favour. So we should be able to hit the ground running once that money feeds through from central government down to onto a local level, because we'll be in the best place in terms of those relationships that we've built, those sites have been identified. It's then just engaging. Building those relationships, using the planning system, and then bringing those sites forward. So I think, you know, the work that this committee and the Income Generation Committee started doing 3 or 4 years ago is now serving us well, and we're in best place to start delivering those sites, albeit it won't be as many units as we think, but it will start the ball rolling. Thank you. Are we happy to note the progress on this report? Yeah. Noted. Thank you. Thanks, James. Agenda item 8 then, please. Worcester City District Collaborative. Lloyd?
Was until they've read the papers. So I think I'll just cover that off basically, and leave any questions to pick up any of the details. So when integrated care boards came into operation a few years ago, it was very clear within the sort of supporting legislation that the delivery arm locally for health and wellbeing improvements should be via a district collaborative. Our district collaborative really was a follow-on from COVID-19 and the incident management response team, which brought a lot of agencies together at that time to focus on, obviously, local communities, and in particular then vaccination. But we decided locally to continue with that group, and the relationships that were built and the trust that was built as part of that time, and then take that into the district collaborative. So in effect, it's a group that meets periodically throughout the year. That includes a wide range of partners in and around health and wellbeing, and the focus of that group is to deliver tactically on the county's health and wellbeing strategy and how that applies to us in Worcester City, and the council's own health and wellbeing priorities as well. So we have an action plan. That action plan is supported by a strategic assessment once a year from Public Health up at the County Council. And our action plan focuses around three priority areas to date, which is set out at paragraph 3.2. And the only other point I would note, Chair, is that given the data that was presented to us at a meeting earlier this year, we do intend to start to change tack and focus on those areas where there are clear inequalities. So we're focusing all that resource, all that effort on those areas to make the biggest difference. That doesn't mean we won't be doing activity and providing services in other areas, but that's where we feel most benefit can be gained. So conscious time, Chair, I'll stop there and take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Lloyd. I'll open it up to the floor. Any questions? Councillor Wilmore?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check for the 25-26 action plan? Are we feeding in new things from the City Council that aren't already part of our own ambition and commitment within the city, or is this an opportunity to do new things, given that we've got sort of other stakeholders and partners and they may attract additional sort of funding?
Again, sorry. Given this committee has oversight of the work of the collaborative, if there are things that this committee wanted us to focus on, then that's something we can take back to the collaborative and discuss. I suppose the thing I would focus on is, given that it's also an arm of the ICB, there's probably not a tension, but there'll be a balance and a mix to be found across a number of partners. So it's not a delivery arm of the City Council. It's across a much wider network, but we can certainly take things back if you think they are missing or they aren't being played out enough.
Yeah, it was, which is great, and given the changes that are about to happen across ICBs, that could be an opportunity or a threat, depending on which way you look at it. But what I mean is maybe some of the things that we would like to do as a City Council, but that we haven't got the resources, financial, manpower or otherwise, if we presented them as options at the district collaborative, is there a chance that they would absorb that into the plan, given that there might be other people who are in a position to contribute towards the either instigation and sustainability of those types of projects?
I think, if I'm being honest, no. It's not a group that is cash rich. I think it's more around data you know, a human resource, but there is no budget. The group doesn't carry a budget. It's reliant on organisations, what they currently do and what they're able to offer over and above that. So I wouldn't see that group or the partners within that group undertaking work that perhaps we're having to do less of or possibly stop over the coming years.
I'll take Councillor Murray and then Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm new to this committee, so forgive me if this is the wrong question, but I just wondered how organisations like the Dawn Project and West Mercia Women's Aid have a strong voice in this partnership, especially when it comes to supporting victims of domestic abuse.
So again, Tom may want to comment as well on this. Those partners are not around the District Collaborative table. The District Collaborative is a core group of members, so statutory agencies, VCSE, and we also bring wider members in for a lesser number of times across the course of a year, just from an information sharing point of view. VCSE are on the group, police are on the group, so I think there are a number of agencies who are working in and around that area. But obviously there are other forums and other groups that are more focused on that particular area of work as well. And if there were any emerging issues or any connections that we think we would need to make with groups such as that, we would certainly reach out, because one of the things I think we do benefit from is that we do pull in groups as and when we need to, based on sort of emerging data or emerging threats.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So looking back to Councillor Wilmore's question, I've been working, myself and Ed have been working with a county council funded group who are looking at health outcomes, improving those in Warndon. And it seems to comply a lot, very, very resonant with the objectives here of your district collaborative. So, well, first of all, I wanted to make you aware of that, because they do have money and they've given some to us. So maybe it's something you want to do, ask them. But in terms of what's happening here, wouldn't other groups start being involved in, you know, supporting these aims and activities, because they seem to cross over? Things like, you know, tackling loneliness, providing the best start in life, these, and health inequalities. It seems a very, yeah, they seem to be trying to do similar things, and maybe, I don't know if, well, they must be aware of each other, but just thought I'd ask.
I don't know whether the project you refer to has received sort of public health grant funding or is a commission service. So it wouldn't necessarily come into contact with the district collaborative. Obviously, again, there are many forums that are touching upon health and wellbeing outcomes. So we're certainly not saying the district collaborative is the singular group to deliver that. Again, you know, VCSE have quite a prominent role, Tom, don't they, on the district collaborative? So if there's anything that needs to come in or go out, they are very much a go-to organisation for us to learn from them about what's going on in the community. But equally, if there are opportunities that are coming out of the district collaborative, they can then share that back into the community as well.
Yeah, just going to add, I'm not sure if that piece of work is in relation to the local super output areas work that's been undertaken by public health, so focusing on a very small area to address specific issues, which is something that's come through the district collaborative. It sort of sits slightly aside to it, but is featured as part of the focus of the district collaborative to bring in those partners around how we can help support it, but is very much looking at wider stakeholders and groups. I think one of the things that the district collaborative is, it's fairly focused in terms of its sort of membership, but very much, you know, I think we're very much clear that there needs to be that sort of outreach into other organisations that exist through the VCSE and some of those representatives, but not everybody is physically around the table, for every meeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm sure the irony of it is if when Warndon and if Warndon receives the £20 million, I mean, all ears will be pricking up in terms of how to, you know, all those relationships will come towards us to find out where the opportunities obviously is. I mean, clearly what is needed is obviously the amount of money, the historical underfunding and investment in Warndon, and you know, I have seen social media posts which kind of say, you know, that money will gentrify certain areas of the city when it kind of comes in. That's like, well, actually, historical underfunding is money is actually what is actually needed in terms of fix the historical issues. So, you know, I mean, in terms of what the District Collaborative has achieved and what it's trying to achieve, is, you know, it is. You know, that lived expression of health is wealth, and a core tenet of progressive public policy, isn't it, in terms of Brickfields and Old Warndon. Are there any other speakers on this item? Are we happy to note it? Is it for noting? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 9 then, please. Annual review of promoting independent living contracts. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. I've produced a fairly detailed report, which hopefully members have all had sight of and been able to review ahead of committee this evening. So I'll try and provide a short summary of some key points, but happy to take any questions around any of the detail. The Promoting Independent Living contract essentially is our means of delivering disabled facilities grants, which is a statutory and mandatory duty for the District Council. In addition to delivering the mandatory element of disabled facilities grants, the contract also delivers a range of discretionary functions and additional grants, which are outlined in section 2.3 of the report. We commission the service currently to an external organisation, Millbrook Healthcare. They've been providing the service for the past 5 years, and prior to that, the service was commissioned to another, actually to Platform Housing Group that delivered it prior to that. It's a busy service that received a lot of inquiries. Over the course of the past 12 months, they received a total of 5,000 inquiries. 763 of those related to Worcester. This is a county-wide service, I should have added. However, there has been a reduction in the number of referrals for disabled facilities grants during the course of the year in comparison to the previous year. The details of that are contained within the report. Section 3.2 provides the breakdown of the number of grants and the costs, the capital costs of those grants completed within Worcester. And that's broken down by the mandatory elements of the DFGs and the various different discretionary grants that we provide. We delegate authority to Millbrook to approve grants up to a value of £15,000. The mandatory DFG cap is £30,000. Anything above £30,000 becomes a discretionary consideration, and that tends to be for much larger works, such as conversions and extensions to properties. But by delegating authority for works up to the value of £15,000 helps to speed up the process from the point of application. We undertake audits of cases, and I think probably what's worth highlighting is around the challenges around timescales for delivery of DFGs. It's something that's identified through performance monitoring, as well as through audits of individual cases, and is a sort of common theme around the length of time that it can take for a DFG to be completed from both the initial contact, the initial assessment by an OT, but also once that reaches the agency, once the agency receives that assessment that's been undertaken by the OT. Section 3.9 provides some detail around the length of time it takes for practical completion of DFG cases. There are a whole range of reasons for the timescales. So it's not solely sitting with Millbrook Healthcare, the provider of the PIL contract. There's a whole range of different stakeholders that are involved, including landlords, whether they're registered providers, private landlords. There's the OT service, customers that requires various quotations to achieve value for money. So it's a whole range of reasons that can affect timescales. And as a result of that, the district councils commissioned a piece of work to undertake a process review, so looking at the end-to-end sort of journey or the process that it takes to try and identify where delays lay and how we can try and improve efficiencies around timescales for delivering. A number of those interventions that were highlighted as part of that review have been undertaken, with further interventions planned. Provided some detail around the current governance arrangements of the contract within the report, and I'll leave it there, Chair, and take any questions anybody might have.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor. Councillor Wilmore, Councillor Lawrenson, Councillor Lewin, Councillor Jagger.
Thanks, Tom. I think we had eye contact as I pulled the face around section 3.9. I know it's the average number of days, but that's not hugely helpful because, of course, if one case takes 14 months, it completely distorts the rest of the data. So have you got any sense of the kind of distribution of that or the mean? Are you generally satisfied that some of them might, only take 4-6 weeks, and then you have a couple of really complex cases that take 12-18 months that drags that average down a little bit, because some of those figures are a little bit difficult to see?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't provide that breakdown of it, and it will be skewed by individual cases. So particularly where it involves conversions and extensions, they take a considerably longer period of time. It requires planning approval, etc., which just extends the time that it takes. So it is the average. The vast majority of works that are undertaken are smaller pieces of work, so stair lifts, level access showers, which are reasonable pieces of work, but they're more straightforward, so more routine than a sort of bespoke extension on a property, for instance. So yeah, you're right to pick up that it will be skewed by some individual cases. I think the point I would say is that despite that, there are still concerns around timescales. So I think it's worth pointing that.
Okay, Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom, for the report. So the first one's a bee in my bonnet about language. The second one is a question. So under 2.3 and 3.7, there's references made to customers, people, residents, citizens of this fine city. That word customers just, doesn't need to be that way. We're talking about people here. 2.5, it says that the funding, I think it's 900,000, also contributes to funding the Act on Energy contract, which to me seems an entirely different purpose, as well as the retention of funding by the council to offset officer costs for the administration of the Better Care Fund scheme. So there's really two questions here. How much of that fund is contributed to Act on Energy, the Act on Energy contract, and how much of the fund is used to cover officer costs? Because presumably by covering both Act on Energy and officer costs, that's less money to pay for interventions that people need for their homes. So I appreciate you might not have the specific figures here and now, but I would like to know what they are at some point. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have those figures to hand. The Act on Energy isn't to fund the core Act on Energy services around information and advice, but I can confirm the exact figures and the figure award taken for delivery. There's a cost and resource implication that we for the sort of processing and management of the Better Care Fund and disabled facility grants for the authority, but I can confirm those figures to you after the committee.
We'd be grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lewin?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I've got a question from Councillor Kinsley, which she asked me to put on her behalf, and it's for it's 3.3, where it says that one of the reasons for blocking DFGs is actually landlords not granting permission. And of course, she says, you know, she's really concerned because she's got quite a few vulnerable residents in rented accommodation. One of the reasons is they've never been able to afford to buy a home. So actually they are more in need than a lot of other people. So what can we do to encourage landlords to grant permission? Because obviously, you know, this is a really important sector. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we do a range of things. So through the contract, there's a housing options advisor and a range of other staff, case officers and technical officers that will engage with the process. So once we have the referral through from the occupational therapist through to Millbrook, the provider, they'll go out and look at the options that are available essentially to that individual and to that household. So considerations are sometimes needed around what's, so looking at the range of options to potentially mitigate that. So the concerns that some landlords have are significant changes to the fabric of the property, which they seek, I suppose, to look at, you know, if that is a significant concern, are there other options that can be implemented that still meet the needs of the individual, but are perhaps less permanent or intrusive, or that have less of an impact. Ultimately, we don't have any direct influence over individual private landlords. We do have some influence over registered providers, so if that becomes a challenge with registered provider properties, then we'll engage with them. But ultimately, where adaptations can't be done, it doesn't mean that that's it. The housing advice service provided through Millbrook will help support that individual to, you know, if the only option is to move, essentially, they'll provide that support to them.
So this is a plea to landlords then. You know, Worcester, like many other places in the country, we've got an ageing population. We've got more people who are going to need homes that are suitable. And actually, maybe they don't view it as a short-term thing, but they're creating a home that is suitable for somebody who's got those requirements and those needs. And actually, they would actually then get a focus from those people who need those homes in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jagger and then Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. I remember from some months ago having a conversation, perhaps in a different committee, about funding for things that are discretionary. So I remember discussing specifically hospital discharges and how we can no longer afford to provide those services. I'm seeing here that we've had 22 grants this year for hospital discharges, but none in the last quarter. Can I just have some clarity? Are we still getting the money from the same fund? Have we gone through a different fund? Is the fact that we don't have those hospital discharges grants in the last quarter a funding issue or an application issue?
Tom?
Yeah, an element of both. So we set, in order to manage the budget, so we have a statutory duty to deliver mandatory DFGs. So I suppose that's always taken the precedent to make sure that we're meeting our statutory responsibilities. The wider discretionary grants aren't statutory, but are, you know, are grants that are there because we recognise the need for them, essentially. What we did at the beginning of the year was to set caps on those grants. I don't believe that we reached the caps on those grants for any of those discretionary elements, but that was to help sort of manage and control that budget to make sure that we weren't overspent and couldn't meet our statutory responsibilities. There have been other discussions, particularly around hospital discharge grants, around making sure that they're meeting the need, the most acute need, or the greatest need to enable people to come out of hospital. Historically, they were used differently and weren't necessarily, best focused to meet need. They were used much more flexibly. So we've been engaging with the acute trust hospitals around how we can focus the use of those grants most effectively to enable that grant to help manage the budget, but also to help enable people to leave hospital as quickly as possible.
Councillor Jagger.
So, am I right in saying that we don't have people who are in hospital not occupying a bed necessarily because they can't have a safe home? Those conversations, that's been taken into consideration based on what you said. Am I correct in concluding that?
Yes. I mean, what I would say is that the hospital discharge grants that we offer aren't the only sort of grants that are available to enable people to return home. So it's not solely reliant on the hospital discharge grants that we have. That's a sort of enabling function. And it tends to be for smaller things that can't be facilitated through other grants. So it'll be things like moving a bed downstairs, or doing a house clearance to clear a room to enable them to move and live downstairs. What the hospitals, the NHS has struggled with is having the ability to deliver those sorts of things, often quite low cost, require somebody to physically go in and do that. Because we've got this contract in place, we've been able to do those practical interventions. Where it's something that's more significant or requires care packages and things like that, that sort of sits outside of our hospital discharge grant scheme.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you may have been referring to is that we did have a temporary pause in DFGs because of oversubscription, and then we found obviously that we had an unspent allocation of that, and hence we reopened that process, hence the figures that you have before you. So that's part of it. Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. As this contract with Millbrook is not ending till 31st of March 2026, my worry is the current pending applications already taking long. Is there a way, is a direct way City Council can approach Millbrook and speed up the process? Their internal system isn't helping at all. I have tried. Not a good experience with Millbrook. So is there a, way we can, as a city, can approach their internal system isn't helping? Thank you.
Great, yeah. So it's something that we're in regular contact, so both through the sort of formal contract management that we have with Millbrook, as well as outside of those meetings. Millbrook have implemented a range of things, so some of it is a capacity pressure, not just with Millbrook, but with contractors. So they've brought on additional contractors to enable actual practical delivery of the grants. So it is something we're really acutely aware of, and it's the sort of topic of conversation about how we can speed up delivery. Some of that is just about building more capacity within the system, within their contractors, so that they can essentially deliver more grants, do more works within properties. So that's something they have done. I think there's probably still room for increasing capacity to speed that process up.